Hi, my name is Kim Valentini, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about adversity as a gift to yourself in finding your life's purpose. We all have plans, ambitions, and goals, right? We all want to bring to this journey called life our unique gifts and leave a lasting imprint. Many of you have mapped out your future and know exactly where you are going. Some of you have already arrived at your chosen destination. But what if unforeseen detours suddenly emerged? And what if the future that you had planned for suddenly changed? Would you be able to take that detour and go down a different path? For some of you, your life plan may already have totally derailed. You may feel lost, alone, and solo, and afraid of what the future might hold. It can be overwhelming and isolating. But somewhere in there, the silver lining might just be that this crossroad of adversity may lead you to your true life's purpose. A little bit about my story. In 2003, I was living the good life. I was married to the man of my dreams. I had 2 beautiful, healthy, school-aged children. I was blessed with career and financial success, was well-traveled and educated. And by all accounts, I had achieved my American dream. And yet, I could hear deep inside of me the rumblings of discontent. The rumblings were hardly audible at first, but I found myself asking questions like, what stones have I left unturned? What passions or desires have I not nurtured? And then I began to ask the deeper question, what is my purpose? I believe we all reach a point in our lives when we start to search for something deeper, richer, and more substantive. We want the sum total of our life to add up to more. This is my story, and back to 2003. I was busy climbing the professional ladder when the company that I had been working for had suddenly sold. The emptiness and lack of fulfillment that I was feeling in the corporate world was compounded by the loss of a job which was tied to my personal identity. On my first day of unemployment, I caught an Oprah episode that would change my future. Oprah opened the show by saying, if you're a woman in your 40s and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life, this is your show. Now, I have to tell you, I'm not one that is prone to taking advice from a talk show host, but when she said grab a pen and a piece of paper, I did as Oprah had instructed. That day, she had on an author by the name of Poe Bronson who had written a book, What Should I Do with My Life? It's Bronson's assertion that we spend the first half of our life preparing for what we're really meant to do in the second half of our life. Now, I am one of those women who, as I got older, did feel like I had it all, but something was missing. So it was interesting to consider that the last 40 years of my career, being a mom, being a wife, was actually preparing me for what I was meant to do in the next 40 years. As a young child, I had always dreamed of traveling to exotic and far-off places. After graduating from college, I had the opportunity to travel beyond the borders of the city I had grown up in. After a summer of waiting tables after having completed college, then Northwest Airlines was advertising a $1,200 around-the-world trip. Fare, I should say. So I spent the next 12 months traveling to the far corners of the earth and living out of a backpack on a student's budget or lack thereof. What I learned in my travels is that most of mankind did not live like the peers that I had grown up with. This year of travel through third world countries was a life-changing experience and profoundly changed my perceptions at a young age. In particular were my experiences in Calcutta, India. Calcutta is an intense bombardment of your senses. The sights, the smells, and the sounds generally are not pleasant. The suffering and the poverty was overwhelming. The sadness and the despair takes your breath away. So I hid in my hostel, paralyzed for days, and was not able to face this harshness of this new reality. But all these years later, I never forgot the experiences and the images in Calcutta. Fast forward 30 years, and back to the Oprah program. Like the loss of a job was a catalyst to a new perspective, that Oprah show was a catalyst to another chapter in my life. Following that show, I wrote down the things that I was meant to accomplish in the second act of my life. The last item on my list was to dedicate 5 hours a week to a service project. List in hand, I headed to the bookstore. I read Bronson's book cover to cover that night, and the next day I distributed 8 copies of the book to like-minded individuals. And 3 short days later, I was on a plane in search of me. It was in those days that followed that my future started to take hold as I traveled through rural villages in Mexico. Armed with some photos of my journey, I returned home and prepared for a meeting to summarize my experience with the 8 people to whom I had given copies of Poe's book. When I arrived to the meeting, there were 62 people gathered, not 8, most of whom I had never met. I showed images of impoverished kids who had been born with severe facial deformities. These were kids that would never go to school or have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. They would never get married. They would never have a job. For some of them, they would never experience something as simple as a first kiss, all for lack of access to a simple surgical procedure. So I asked the group for their suggestions and their ideas to get a project off the ground. At the conclusion of the meeting, a stranger walked up to me and said, "Does this get you started?" It was a check for $10,000. That first donation validated my vision for what would become Smile Network International. 11 years ago, it was an idea on a piece of paper. Today, this organization has a network of thousands of volunteers who give of their time to provide gifts of a smile to some of the poorest children in the world. We have a presence in 28 surgical sites around the world on 4 continents in 11 countries. And since 2003, we've operated on over 3,500 children. In the space of 45 minutes, and for just $500, we're able to provide a life-altering surgery. I have been blessed to meet some remarkable people along the way, but I'd like to introduce you to just a few of them. Lucila is the mother of 3. In her remote mountain community, a baby born with a cleft is considered a curse. Villagers believe that if the child is allowed to live amongst them, their crops and their livestock will perish. Lucila was walked to a field, and the villagers demanded that she lay her cursed child down to die. She did the only thing a mother could do. Traveling on foot for days, she made her way to our team in Cusco, Peru. 1 year later, we traveled back to her village at 14,000 feet in the Andes to find out how her story ended. On a crisp fall morning, we found Lucila and David, the curse gone, the cleft repaired, erasing the pain and discrimination for this small child, leaving only dignity and hope and a beautiful smiling little boy with a bright new future. Meet 72-year-old Alicio. Shunned and abandoned as a young child, Alicio tearfully told us that he had never in his life sat at a table and shared a meal with another human being. He told us that when he ate and drank, food and water would come out of his nose due to the large opening in the roof of his mouth. He told us that he would rather die than go on living this way. Our surgical team consulted, as this was a risky surgery for somebody of Alicio's age. And after an already long day, they went back into surgery and granted an old man his wish. And Alicio is now welcome at the table. Meet Manrani. We met her a few weeks ago. To provide for her 7 children, her husband works in the fields while she sells oranges on the side of the road. Manrani traveled for hours from her village in northern Haiti, not for a surgery for herself, but hoping that her youngest child would get a place on the already overcrowded surgical schedule. You only have to look at her to know how hard her life has been. One of our nurses described her as one of the saddest persons she had ever met. No one should have to endure a lifetime with a cleft. Her baby made our surgical schedule, as did she. The photo says it all. And then there is Sergio Rodriguez. People in his mountain village whispered he was cursed. When Sergio smiled at someone, that person would look away. Then one day, Sergio's mother heard the word rumbling through the village that the American doctors were coming. And at 10 years old, Sergio and 4 of his buddies walked down a mountainside on a 17-hour journey to find our team. They arrived with no food in their belly, no money in their pockets, and no shoes on their feet. In the following days, our visiting team of medical professionals erased Sergio's curse and revealed his remarkable smile. This is the same child with a very different future. On a recent surgical mission in Mexico, we had a surprise visitor. Sergio, the young man who was once shunned, is now a 19-year-old man with hopes, dreams, and ambitions to be a performer. This boy captures for me what Smile Network is all about. I believe the word miracle applies to every surgery. I have thousands of stories, and with each, an unlikely phoenix emerges, and stories of despair become stories of hope and inspiration. I've been touched by the lives of these kids and their journey. I've also been touched by the lives of the volunteers. There are so many, but I would like to tell you about one in particular. Her name is Melanie. Melanie had had a very successful run in the corporate world. By age 50, she was able to retire, deciding to spend the next 50 years doing what she had spent the first 50 years preparing for. This is what I want you to know about her. She does what she says she is going to do. She is feisty and opinionated. She is elegant and is rarely seen in anything other than Pucci clothing. Melanie rarely gets her hands dirty. She never had children of her own, so we brought her to a surgical site in Mexico. We put her to work in her designer clothing with her perfectly coiffed hair and manicured nails. Her job was to bathe the babies before surgery. The first baby we gave her had a diaper so full and clothes so crusted with mud that they stood on their own. I must admit, Melanie was a little weak at the knees. But by week's end, she was into it. For a woman who had never had children, the act of bathing a child stirred something deep inside of her. I believe she found her passion, her life's purpose, in that dirty bath water. She boldly declared that she was going to raise $1 million for these kids to sustain the work. Melanie, my friend, my mentor, became close. I recall a particular mentoring session. I was feeling defeated, tired, and worn out by the never-ending demands of running a charity on a shoestring budget. Melanie scolded me. She said, "Kim, your problem is that you need every day to be a mountaintop. How can you take in the full majesty of the mountain if you don't spend time in the valley?" She pushed me. She challenged me. And shortly after that exchange, I received a call that my friend, my mentor, had suddenly passed. I was devastated. Why had she not been given the chance to put the first 50 years of life experience into giving back? Much has happened in that decade since I first heard those rumblings of discontent and asked myself that question, what is my purpose? In the span of time, I have made friends along the way who have made my life deeper, richer, and more substantive. And the sum total did add up to something far greater than the parts. I'm growing older, and like many of you, I have experienced major life changes. Notably, my children are now grown and have left home for college. And sadly, my husband and I went through an unforeseen divorce. There were days I wasn't sure I was going to survive. There were nights I got down on my hands and my knees and prayed that the gaping hole in me would heal. I was crippled emotionally, and I teetered on the edge. I've always been a warrior, had a warrior's heart, but I was losing my will to fight. And witnessing my sadness, a friend tenderly said, "Kim, there is a reason why the windshield is so much bigger than the rearview mirror. Don't let the past define you and look to the future." And as I slowly started to emerge from the fog and started to share my story, I learned that there were others that were experiencing many of the same things that I was. Their pain or their loss brought on by similar circumstances or also by other kinds of life setbacks. Loss of a job, a serious health crisis, or the death of a spouse, or worse yet, a child, and the list continued to grow. There were others hurting just like me, and when I listened to their pain, my pain began to feel different. As I came out of the darkness, new truths started to emerge, and this is what I learned. In moments of unrest, or when we are unsettled, or in the extreme cases when we have suffered from the experience of life's changes, it is in those moments that our under-nurtured passions and our secret desires start whispering to us and sometimes change the course of our lives. How many of you hear the little voice inside of you whispering? The whisper may be muffled or vague, but when you are forced into assessing the path that you have traveled and the reason that you have arrived at the destination, you often will discover about yourselves gifts that you didn't even know that you had. So what if, for just a moment, we tuned out all the voices in our head and listened only to the voices in our heart? Intent on listening to the whispers of my own heart, I recounted those painful nights of being solo with my thoughts. And finally, there came a moment of clarity, and I understood that it wasn't supposed to be quick. It wasn't supposed to be easy. These detours had purpose. I was supposed to feel the pain, the loss, the isolation, to such an extent that it would leave an imprint on my DNA. The universe wanted me to know what it felt like to be dismissed, abandoned, and rejected at its deepest level. Okay, about now you might be asking yourself, wasn't this a presentation about a rising phoenix? It is. Let me explain. As human beings, we heal ourselves when we feel free to speak our own truths. When we hear the words and experiences of others, we open ourselves to new possibilities because our experiences and stories contain the answers to each other's questions. What we cannot find in searching the riches and rubbles of our own life, we may find in the witnessing of other lives. When I watched Lucila claim her son's life, I believed I could do it too. When I learned of Sergio's great courage to embark on a journey down a mountainside, I knew I could make it up to the next mountain peak. And when I hear your stories in times of adversity and witness your journey of putting one foot in front of the other, I believe that I can make it to the other side of my own darkness. In the passing of our stories, we speak to one another's hearts. We all know someone who is suffering, and we are all capable of making a difference in the life of someone else. I'd like to share with you one last anecdotal story. In the midst of what felt like the wreckage of my life, I was having a discussion one day with a girlfriend, and we agreed that life is too short to be sad indefinitely. That friend gave my warrior heart permission to put down my ammunition. It was a turning point for me in that moment. I threw my hands in the air and I boldly declared to anyone within earshot, I surrender. And with that declaration, simultaneously, a courier walked in the front door. You can't make this stuff up. Flashback. Remember the volunteer Melanie and her bold declaration, before I'm done, I will raise $1 million? I read her will and wept. Her donation to Smile Network has exceeded $1 million. She made a promise and she kept it. I knew that that was a turning point in my life. I knew that in announcing to the universe, I surrender, the universe was telling her can begin. I thought I was at a place where I could wind down, dig my feet in the sand, hold a glass of wine in one hand and my husband's in the other. I wanted to watch the sun go down on a beach with him as often as possible. And given the choice and a different set of circumstances, I'm absolutely certain that that's what I would have done. But with Melanie's will in hand, I understood that my life's work was just beginning. Melanie said, climb higher, climb harder. She didn't tell me that there would be roadblocks, detours, and seemingly insurmountable hurdles. I've spent more time maneuvering than the valley than I care to admit. But today I can tell you that the view from this mountaintop is pretty majestic. It does not matter where you come from or the road that you traveled to today's destination. It only matters that you pick yourself up, lean on those that love you, and move on. Engage in something in which you are compassionate about. There's a child, a friend, a stranger who needs your time. An enlightened Mother Teresa once said, quote, Do not come to Calcutta. Stay where you are. Find your own Calcutta. Find the sick, the suffering, and the lonely right there where you are, in your own homes and in your own families, in your workplaces and in your school. You can find Calcutta all over the world if you have the eyes to see. Everywhere, wherever you go, you find people who are unwanted, unloved, uncared for, and just rejected by society, completely forgotten, completely left alone. End quote. The world is a much smaller place than it used to be. We are global citizens in a global community. And there are silver linings at the end of the tunnel. My mother always said, long before Kelly Clarkson said this, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Each of you in your own unique way is amazing. You have a story and you have a purpose built on your life experiences because each step of the journey takes you to the next place. Allow your stumbling blocks to become your stepping stones. And listen to that little voice inside of you. Your heart will never misguide you. Be there for someone. Inspire, encourage, and support one another to be the very best version of whom you are truly meant to be. And therein, being the best version of you is where your life's purpose lies. Sometimes the only transportation you have in this world is a leap of faith. My motto is jump, look later. Give yourself permission to jump. In the remaining few minutes, I would like to ask for the privilege of showing you what my silver lining looks like, what resulted out of a difficult time and transition in my life. The following 6-minute documentary was produced by a former Oprah producer, and it chronicles the lives of one of our patients, Samuel, and his life-changing moment in time. Thank you for the privilege of talking today. Okay, this is a special little guy. This is Samuel. Last year when he was here, he was under 3 kilos at 3 or 4 months old. And so we told Mom it was really important she take him home and feed him very well and get him healthy enough for surgery. Imagine how long it takes to feed this baby. You see the small amount that they're able to give it. Feeding becomes a full-time job.
Honestly, I didn't know that we would ever see Samuel back. He was that sick. He was that sick and undernourished. And you know, in the United States, maybe we can't put perspective around that because it's feeding a baby, but so often it's really kind of survival of the fittest. If you're a mother of 5 or 6 children and you're cooking and you're cleaning and you're gathering the firewood, and it just takes a lot of hours to feed a baby like this, and you run out of time. And those are the heartbreaking situations, because if you don't operate, the child may die. And if you do operate, the child may die.
We're really hopeful today that when he's weighed, he will be weighed enough for surgery, but we're not sure yet. You can see Mom is concerned. Mom is really concerned.
When she was told that Samuel had made the surgical schedule, she was so emotional.
He worked so hard.
Amy y Kevin es una pareja y ellos son los que han pagado.
Kevin and Amy have joined us on this mission. They're parents of 2 beautiful little girls. And I think that when you're a parent, you just can't help but be moved by these children and what they suffer from.
There really aren't words to describe this experience and the power and the ability to change someone's life for so little amount of money. And it's amazing.
I think the face of philanthropy or volunteering has changed tremendously over the course of the last 10 or 20 years. And people don't want to just write out a check. People want a hands-on, tangible experience. What evolved out of that is we discovered an opportunity to create awareness and raise money by putting people on adventure travel experiences. We introduce those volunteers that have raised money to the families who are receiving the surgeries. And this amazing thing happens when you introduce a parent of a child with a cleft to a sponsor.
It's amazing what Smile Network does, and there's just no way to reproduce the experience of being here, though, and seeing what people have gone through to get to this point, in particular the woman whose child we're sponsoring.
I'm a mom of 3 and 4-year-old, and you just know the love of a mother and how strong it is, and to know that you were able to help that mother and that baby.
Yeah, it's hard to reproduce just in print or in conversation.
Y en un ratito lo vas a ver hermoso.
Samuel had surgery about 10 a.m. and it's been about 5 hours since he got out of surgery, and he's been having a little bit of trouble breathing. The doctors and nurses have been taking incredible care of him.
He's having a little bit of a hard time breathing without some oxygen for support. He's going to do well, just needs a little extra TLC. I feel really bad for Mom right now because she can't come into the recovery area, and she is sat out there watching other parents receive their kids after surgery with their lips and palates repaired.
I'm sure the mom is going through hell right now, and so my heart breaks for her. I feel very bad for her, and I know that it's going to be a wonderful thing when it's over, but it's been a long, hard day for her.
Hi, Samuel.
Beautiful, and I just hope he has just a wonderful life and that this has been able to change the family's life.